Testing 1, 2, 3. Hi everyone, and welcome to another Woke Wednesday. This podcast was created to shed light on different societal issues which have been at the forefront of public discourse through one of the most divisive times in American history. More so, it was created with the intent of allowing those who have often been neglected, shunned, or misunderstood to have a chance to share their experiences and thoughts. I hope that this dialogue encourages critical conversation and activism amongst all listeners. And I hope you'll tell all your friends about it and share it on your social platforms. Now, let's get into these current events. California Governor Gavin Newsom recently signed an executive order that placed a moratorium on the death penalty in California, which means that no executions will happen as long as Newsom is governor. Right now, there are 737 people on death row in California, which is the largest in the nation. Yet, after this was signed, that is no longer the case. After Newsom delivered the news, he explained his decision in a very emotional speech. He reconciled his decisions with evidence from the National Academy of Sciences reports that states that 1 in every 25 people on death row is innocent. Being that, California currently has 737 inmates on death row, which means that if that statistic is valid, then out of those 737 people, 30 of them are innocent. Newsom couldn't accept the responsibility of potentially killing 30 innocent people, and after meeting with different families affected by the death penalty, he then decided to put this into action. California is now the 4th state to place the death penalty on a moratorium, and this moratorium does not mean that any prisoner that was on death row will necessarily have his or her sentence vacated and then being released. Of course, as expected, Newsom's decision was met with backlash from California lawmakers citing that Newsom is ripping any sense of justice away from these families, and that in 2012 and 2016, ballot propositions that would have ended the use of the death penalty in California were both lost because the voters chose to keep the death penalty. His choice was also met with some tweets from yours truly, Donald Trump, who responded with, "Friends and families of the always forgotten victims are not thrilled, and neither am I." This also isn't the first move Newsom has made in order to remove the punishment from California altogether. As lieutenant governor, he backed a failed ballot proposition in 2016 that ultimately wasn't passed and was very controversial at the time because the governor at the time, Jerry Brown, and Attorney General Kamala Harris both wouldn't take sides on the issue. Although Harris did say she wanted to remain neutral because she was the Attorney General, she personally doesn't support the use of capital punishment. Girl, bye. I'm going to give y'all my thoughts on her a little later, not in this episode though. In my opinion, we have no right to systematically choose who gets to live and who gets to die. There is also no humane or just way to kill a person, no matter how anyone spins it. And there's actually no evidence to back any assertion that the death penalty deters criminals from committing atrocious crimes. While this issue may be divisive and rendered as a political one, I think that one also has to take into account the moral side of it all. As a government system made up of humans, what human authority do we have to decide when another human gets to stop living? Those are just my personal thoughts on it. Maybe I'll give y'all an episode in the future expounding upon those. We'll see.
This is the man at the center of what the Justice Department says is one of the biggest college admissions scandals in history. Prosecutors say William Singer, also known as Rick, took money from parents to get around the admissions process at elite schools. It shined a light on the extensive and sometimes illegal methods some wealthy parents use to get their kids into colleges. Singer reportedly ran the scam under the guise of his education consulting firm called The Key. The website boasts about helping over 90,000 adults with life coaching and beating the odds to get into college. 2 days after the scandal was made public, most of The Key's website seemed to be offline. Singer marketed his guide to getting into elite universities with an extensive focus on boosting individual credentials, selling parents and students a world where anything is possible. Singer also pushed the idea of creating a personal brand to stand out among applicants.
She got totally engaged in her brand, in her story, in her passion by creating a youth movement around global warming. Now that she's at college, that brand is continued.
This idea is also the focus of Singer's 2014 book, Getting In, where he touts making a brand as a centerpiece of getting into the school of your choice. Another piece of advice from Singer: find the smartest kids and buddy up.
Go make a group from the smartest kids in class and join that group and create a study group. Everybody's doing it. Everybody's getting extra help, and everybody's creating groups so that they can have success. Don't be afraid to find other people to help you.
Singer also told students and parents that there's no shame in getting additional assistance.
You need to listen to what your teacher has to say and take notes off of the PowerPoints that are given, off the board, and you need to be really, really focused while you're in class. But part of that may be that you'll need to get some help from the outside.
Singer's tips on hard work as the key to success now seem ironic, as the FBI's investigation revealed his central role in rigging the system to help people get ahead. It's unclear if all his clients were clued into these activities, or if some were kept in the dark.
Now, I'm sure everyone has seen the news regarding this college admissions scandal that's happening amongst the elites and the wealthy. While I would typically focus on this recent headliner just in the current events section of our episode, we thought it best to expand the topic into an entire episode in which we focus on college affordability and college accessibility. Because I am an educator myself and have been privileged enough to be afforded one of the best educations possible in the country, I have very, very strong opinions concerning our education system and the need for reform. Actresses Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin were among several of the elite names that were charged in what is now known as the biggest college admissions scam ever. The U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI charged more than 50 people in a scheme to secure positions for their children at different schools like Yale, Georgetown, USC, UCLA, Harvard, and several other schools. Whether it was bribing athletic coaches, having SAT proctors give students the correct answers during the test, or some parents going as far as to purchasing athletic equipment for their children to make it look like they participated in that sport, the lengths that were taken to ensure these children were given a spot in their respective university is crazy. This entire scandal prompted social media to respond with a conversation surrounding affirmative action and who's really benefiting the most from our education system. As I was scrolling through Twitter, because y'all know I love Twitter, I saw countless tweets concerning this case that all culminated down to 3 main points. 1, how is it that those at the top who actually benefit the most from the system would try to scam it? That makes no sense. 2, so what's going to be the punishment for these wealthy, white individuals when Black mothers literally get jailed for providing different addresses so their child can attend a better school in a different district? And 3, so really it's not the Black and brown people who are stealing these spots in terms of affirmative action. It's actually the elite and the white people. Just saying. College accessibility has long been an issue for disadvantaged communities. The education system as a whole has been disproportionately set up to privilege wealthier students and white and Asian demographics more so than Black and Latinx students. Being that socioeconomic status is the number one predictor of a school's success, and Black and Latinos and Hispanics fall on the lower end of socioeconomic status, it makes sense that big-name colleges and universities lack holistic representation across the different racial and ethnic groups in this country. If you didn't know, UGA, where I went to school, only has 8% of Black people there. 8%. That's roughly around 2,500 students out of the 30,000 plus that attend this school, if not more. That is insane. And only 0.1% Native American. What? Don't even get me started on UGA and their demographics. Anyways, college is expensive, like super expensive. And having the means to afford it, or even be able to have the option of thinking of it, is very limiting for many everyday Americans. Although minority families spend less on college than white families do, the cost of attendance is much higher than those of white families. Not to mention state and federal funding. If you didn't know, now you do, that for education spending for public colleges that are either 2 years or a 4-year program, $1,000 less is spent for every Black and Latino student in comparison to their white counterparts. This huge disparity means that resources and support systems are limited because, hello, there's no money allocated for these students to have those resources and supports that they need to succeed. And these differences add up too. Nationally, public colleges spend approximately $5 billion less educating their minority students in comparison to the white ones. $5 billion, y'all. That's so much fucking money that minority students are not given for whatever reason. I say all of that to say that even when college is somewhat accessible for minority students, it still isn't done in a racially equitable manner. The achievement gap is also a major factor in why college is not as accessible for communities of color. Yes, the number of individuals in every racial and ethnic group to earn a degree has increased. However, the rate at which Black and Latinx students are earning these degrees is at a much slower one. If you don't know what the achievement gap is, it's the observed persistent disparity in measures of educational performance among subgroups of the United States. Students, especially groups defined by socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, and gender. There are major disparities in how quality education is dispersed throughout this nation that doesn't just come from a lack of an individual not having a desire to have an education. Systems set in place that disallow students of color to be privy to the same prestigious opportunities that others have the natural advantage of having. And these systems don't just affect people of color in general, but also students with disabilities, LGBTQ students, impoverished students, undocumented students, and other identifying factors all place these individuals in an unfavorable spot in terms of having equal access to higher education.
Educational inequality is probably more than anything else the fundamental root of broader inequality. If we look at inequality in access to particular careers, inequality in income and wealth, inequality in the nature of political participation, all those things are mitigated by equalizing the skills that education produces, not only the academic skills, but the dispositions, the frames of minds, the conscientiousness, the diligence, the sense of agency. And so I think there is nothing more important we could do to produce the type of society we want than to raise outcomes in the field of education, so that knowing somebody's race or ethnicity tells you nothing at all about what their test scores or grades or occupation might be. There's not just one challenge to face when we talk about achievement gaps. Even if we just talk about racial achievement gaps, we have students of color in high-income suburban districts that are lagging their white classmates. We have inner-city school districts that are high poverty, have a difficult time attracting teachers. So the work that needs to happen is to figure out how in each of these contexts we can make the changes that are necessary to produce the excellence to which we aspire. There are needs that kids in inner cities have that people in upper income suburbs never even imagine. But the most effective schools and teachers in the inner city adapt to those needs. They meet the kids where they are. They establish person-environment fit for these kids as they pass through the school. And if we can do that at some greater scale, it truly is plausible that we can have much less poverty in the next generations, and that we can have the society with regard to race that we want in the future.
And these unfavorable spots aren't going anywhere either, especially since the Trump administration just proposed a $7 billion cut for the education department, which would eliminate after-school programs and summer programs for students in high-poverty areas. Now, what the fuck good does that do for anyone except for DeVos, who is so adamant on this idea of school choice and funding more private and charter schools? And if you didn't know, now you do. I personally work at a charter school. And this isn't shade to the school that I particularly work at, but the charter school system in general, as a whole, that charter schools are not always the best option for students living in high poverty areas. One, because you're taking away from traditional public schools having more money and being built in those areas. Two, and this isn't just in charter schools, so don't get me wrong when I'm saying this, the retention rates are much lower, which is not a good thing, because if a student is in the 7th grade but reads at a 1st grade reading level, yet we're just going to pass that student to the next grade, how is that beneficial to the student? Obviously, I know that there are studies that say that the higher a student goes in grade level, that the less likely retention is to benefit. But if we are retaining kids in elementary school, who else is going to do it? Those in the middle school areas, or possibly even in high school. Obviously, it depends on a case-by-case basis. I'm just saying, retention could potentially help some students more so than they could hurt. Also, charter schools as a whole, to me, reflect modern-day corporate America, being that some of them can be huge cash cows and only care about the money and how much a student gives them because of state funding. I'm not saying this is all charter schools, but a huge majority of them. I just personally think, as someone who has grown up in the public school education system, that public school needs to be prioritized and given better funding, more resources, and more opportunities for students to succeed overall. If you want to know more about my opinion on the education system, you should go back and listen to our education episode or DM me. I love getting DMs. Making higher education an affordable option for all families across the U.S. has to be at the forefront of every single candidate's thoughts in this 2020 election race coming up. Those in government positions right now, those in the education world, and beyond. It's extremely telling how, although out of all these people who were recently caught up in this admission scandal, that the conversation was even an option to be had. Because the elite and wealthy are the ones controlling who's admitted into these schools, it's like a continuous cycle of the wealthy doing favors for their friends and beyond. It's not at all a meritocracy. but a pure reflection of nepotism and politics and social structures that are built to benefit one group of people. To answer the question my friend Jazz posed when she asked me to talk about this episode, should Aunt Becky go to jail just like the Black mothers that have been sent to jail for using a different address? Well, I think that if the structures that are built to keep Black and brown children from attending the best schools possible were broken, we wouldn't have to worry in some regards of how our parents using different addresses for the betterment of our education plays out. Yet, that's not the case, and it will continue being the case, unfortunately, for a long time. Should she go to jail? Duh! If Black and brown mothers using a different address gets them hard jail time, and I mean hard jail time, y'all, like 5 years or more, then the same should apply for the rich white moms who literally paid bribes to get their kids into some of the elite schools in the country. Should go to jail too. Now, is that likely to happen? No. These people are at the top of their respective fields. They have money. They're white. I will be truly shocked, flabbergasted, all of the above, if anyone in this case receives hard jail time. If any jail time at all. I don't mean to sound patronizing or negative or pessimistic or whatever you want to call it, but that's just a fact. Jail is not likely to happen for these people's future. What we need to do in terms of lifting the burden of marginalized communities having access to higher education is making the spending more equitable in terms of education opportunities from pre-K all throughout college and postgraduate school as too. Because postgraduate school, y'all, this shit is pricey. I'm trying to get into law school and LSAT preparation is so expensive. We have to close achievement gaps by investing into more sustainable policies and support systems for all students, which means we need higher pay for teachers, programs that accommodate all disabilities, which means we need more qualified humans in that field that are able to equitably assess students' needs and determine what they need, and so much more. We need to eliminate student debt because there's studies that show that eliminating the student debt would result in the GDP growing between $86 billion to $106 billion a year for the next 10 years. It could add jobs, lower the unemployment rate as well. These are just a few provisions that could be used to alleviate the financial burden of higher education that many of us are accustomed to. When I say we need to get rid of this debt, who child? Someone needs to, I'm not saying go commit a crime, but one of y'all needs to go hack into Sally Mae and do a little deleting because I'm not trying to pay back all these loans. Period. I hope that this episode was informative and thought-provoking for all that listen and for those that will listen in the future. I hope that we all realize just how disproportionate our education system is and how we have a moral responsibility to close the gap for underachieving students to gain the same access to a high-quality education as their privileged counterparts. My grandma always said, one thing that no one will ever be able to take away from you is your education, which is true, but some people do not even have the same opportunity to have their education in the first place. And that has to change. Remember, all of these opinions are my own, but they should be everyone else's. Have a woke Wednesday. Thank you for another Woke Wednesday. Transcripts of entire episodes will be available on the Woke Wednesday website. Episodes are written and produced by Hannah Mason and Trey Leonard of Linico Entertainment. Episodes are hosted by Hannah Mason and edited by Trey Leonard. All graphics are designed by Anna French.